to just remember that. So our next speaker is an officer of Stop the War and a member of the CND National Council. Please welcome Jenny Clegg.
Thanks very much. What will a Trump presidency mean for the Asia Pacific? Will we see US-China relations deteriorate further, even a Trump war on China? Let's start by considering his first presidency and then how Biden built on that. Perhaps Trump's greatest achievement in his first term was to persuade the US elites to prioritise countering China's rise. He reversed 30 years of engagement to start a trade and technology war, initiated the Quad linking the US, Australia, Japan and India, and towards the end of his administration, his Secretary of State Mike Pompeo launched a new Cold War in a speech warning of the threat from the Chinese Communist Party to freedom and democracy. Trump also got NATO to take up the China issue at its summit in 2019, despite the reluctance of the Europeans, and it was left up to Biden to persuade US allies further of China indeed as the greatest challenge to their own security. Biden adopted an ideologically driven strategy to build an alliance of democracies against autocracies led by Russia and China. AUKUS was agreed in 2021, then the Ukraine war was grasped as an opportunity to weaken Russia and in that way also weaken China. China was implicated from the outset, with warmongers insisting that since Russia had invaded Ukraine, China was then bound to invade Taiwan. In this way, with an eye to a global NATO, the Biden administration has insisted the security of Europe and the Indo-Pacific are interlinked. The militarization of the Pacific has seen exponential acceleration, with new US bases, most notably in the Philippines and Japan, tightening the grip around Taiwan. Facilities have been prepared in the Pacific for more nuclear-capable bombers, military exercises have increased in scale and frequency, both Australia and Japan have agreed massive increases in military spending, and significantly, a new US-Japan defence agreement also gives more recognition to Japan as a military power in its own right. Biden played games with the One China policy, hinting at US involvement in the defence of Taiwan, whilst strengthening a defence treaty with the Philippines, which would indeed see US armed forces directly involved in the event of a conflict with China in the South China Sea. Such a conflict could also see Australian and Japanese armed forces drawn in through a new agreement between what's called the Squad, Japan, Australia, the US and Philippines, and Britain could also be drawn in here through its recent arms exchange with Japan. Meanwhile, Japan has appointed a defence attaché to Taiwan, once its colony. The most recent US-Philippines military exercises saw the US deploy previously banned land-based ballistic missiles with observers from Japan, South Korea, Germany, France, the UK, India, Indonesia and Malaysia looking on. The Quad and the Squad, also with New Zealand and North Korea, now form a loose network of countries sharing military intelligence, cooperating militarily, including in weapons manufacture, with operational, commercial and financial linkages. This forms the basis of an Asian NATO-style collective defence agreement, which could be joined with NATO into a global force as a one way to contain a China going stronger and stronger. European allies finally came to accept the notion of the China threat at the NATO summit this year in July, where China was implicated as the decisive enabler in the Ukraine war, with Iran and North Korea also mentioned. With NATO now linking the security of the Atlantic and the Pacific, warmongers are claiming Russia, China, North Korea, Iran form a deadly quartet of allies threatening the very existence of Western civilization. But another regional divide has appeared in the Southeast Asian countries. First of all, refused to take sides in the Ukraine war, and then became horrified by the genocide in Gaza, Malaysia and Indonesia as Muslim-majority countries in particular. Following the election of the pro-independence DPP in Taiwan, though with only 40% of the vote, the former leader of the Kuomintang spoke about his meeting with Xi Jinping and of China's commitment to a peaceful resolution of the Taiwan situation, drawing attention to China's efforts to promote peace in the Ukraine and the Middle East. In the Philippines, Marcos Jr. is upping the stakes in the South China Seas, but Indonesia has joined with China in an intergovernmental committee to deal with the island disputes and apparent acceptance that both sides have legitimate claims. The recent BRICS summit showed up the failure of Biden's foreign policy, the failure to isolate Russia, the failure of sanctions and the weaponization of finance, the refusal of countries across the political spectrum to be divided in a new Cold War, and now Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia and Indonesia, the 4 largest economies in Southeast Asia, are likely to join the BRICS as partners. The US is laser focused on containing China's technological advance, especially in AI and space, areas key to the future of warfighting. Well, they are being used now, so not so much the future. These technologies are covered now both in AUKUS and in NATO, and they are vital to the US achieving full spectrum dominance necessary to bring about China's subordination. This technological race is hugely costly. Both allies and private investors must be drawn in. And now perhaps we can see why Elon Musk was dancing around Trump's stage. The internet magnates backed Trump to gain better access into the digitization, not only of the US military, but also of NATO and the Pacific allies. Turning to the UK, Starmer sees AI and space as amongst the key areas of economic growth. Labour's industrial strategy and its pro-US foreign policy are clearly linked through the military connection. Mandelson was talking last week about the need to diffuse digitisation all the way through our armed forces, and the UK is in prime position to also do this through NATO as well as the Pacific, through AUKUS and the UK-Japan alliance, offering something special perhaps to the Trump-Musk marriage. So finally now, Biden identified the 2020s as the decisive decade. Kissinger, just before he died last year, saw the next 10 years, that is to 2033, as the most at risk of a US-China war. In the worst case scenario now, encouraged by the far-right surge, Marcos Jr. or Lai Ching-te could take one step too far, sparking a hot war with the US in direct conflict with China. Also, Japan's new Prime Minister, Ishiba, belongs to a far-right group which believes Japan was a victim in World War II, as do powerful figures in the Japanese military, whose growing influence in Taiwan and the Philippines may cast a ghastly pall over the region. However, the US ruling class is torn. The ideologues want to end the war in Ukraine and move as swiftly as possible onto China. However, if they are seen to desert Zelensky, how would this affect Taiwan, the Ukraine of the East? Both the Taiwanese and also the Filipinos would surely see that there is no future as US proxies. Better to settle their differences with China and get on with economic development. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jenny. Again, a lot of information there. As John said this morning, it shows the importance of events like these where we can come together and discuss some of these things in more detail. So there will be plenty of time for discussion and questions on it.